Welcome to the Brothers and Sisters podcast. This is what's coming up next, so stay tuned.
That's the point with this, though, and Autumn's point about it flopping. Every single review on In the Heights has been fantastic. Everybody who saw the movie was like, it was fantastic. Apparently, and I even know this, though I couldn't find it, there was some sort of informal social media boycott. So actually, we're going to talk about the controversy surrounding The Heights, because the discussion has been super interesting and broken down along racial lines also. So The Heights, I guess, was a play written by Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton fame.
Yeah. Well, this updated version of it.
Yeah. This is an updated version of that play, which I think he wrote maybe in 2007 or 2008. They turned it into a movie, and it's called In the Heights. So I'm Donald. Joseph, you're from New York. Autumn and I lived in New York for years.
Spent a lot of time in Washington Heights.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Much time there.
So Lin-Manuel Miranda is kind of sort of with Hamilton. For those who don't know, even I don't know how anybody could know now. It's the idea, the story of a founding father, Alexander Hamilton, and the founding fathers, except they're rapping and dancing. They're all Black and Latino, right? So this guy's kind of sort of made his mark, providing representation or showing representation of people who aren't normally represented. But In the Heights has a lot of, I don't know how else to put this, fair-skinned, mestizo type
the
Latinos.
The play
more white passing.
I have not seen the play either. He got a lot of pushback from Afro-Latinos and Black people generally, like, where are the dark-skinned Latinos in your production? The director of the movie responded super defensively, much unlike, and we probably can get into it, because we'll touch on it at least, much like the creator of Friends, when people were like, where's the Black people? And he got super defensive. And then, unfortunately, because I had a lot of respect for her, Rita Moreno and Stephen Colbert was like, leave it alone. This is not the time. Now, she's walked that back today, saying, that, she was ashamed of her response or whatever, but you said it. So, like, you obviously were thinking it at some point. Colorism, right? Do we blame Lin-Manuel Miranda? His response was actually the best one out of everybody's involved. He owned it. Although he kind of sort of tried to not push it off, but he was like, I'm just the producer, right? I didn't do necessarily casting or anything. But it sparked
produced this, man.
It sparked an interesting discussion about representation versus anti-Blackness, because I think the two are often confused, or in the sense that if you have one, like, you can't have the other. So when I broached this discussion, there was a lot of, but Lin-Manuel did, Hamilton, like, this guy's made, like, representation, like, it's like what he does of, like, Latinos and people who aren't represented, which again is probably factual, but it's also factual. There's a ton of anti-Blackness in white people, Black people, Asians, and certainly Latinos also.
Yep.
I'm curious to know what, although, and again, I preface it, none of us have seen the movie, nor the play. So
it didn't do well, right? Like,
so I also learned that too, Autumn.
Like, it made 11 million, and I think that's part of the reason. Like,
the youngsters.
A lot of Afro-Latinos who are like, no.
Wait, you mean the film hasn't done well yet? Is that what you're saying?
It flopped. They're hoping that as this controversy dies down, the summer comes in, it'll do better. But yeah, it cleared 11 million first week. It was like 7th or 8th in the box office.
But I mean, it's also COVID times though, right?
But I mean, the movies ahead of it destroyed it though. Like what is it? But and then that was a point brought up also. It's a musical, right? So it's gonna be.
I think a lot of people just don't like musicals.
I don't know. Les Miserables did extremely well.
Well, yeah.
Wait, Les Miserables did well? I thought that did horrible too.
I don't know how it did like
Or
financially.
maybe it did good numbers. I know it got horrible reviews.
So that's the point with this, though, and Autumn's point about it flopping.
Bad.
Every single review on In the Heights has been fantastic. Everybody who saw the movie was like, it was fantastic. Apparently, and I even know this, though I couldn't find it, there was some sort of informal social media boycott, and people didn't see it.
Huh.
Yeah,
It
that's
must
I
have been
looked for it.
amongst them.
Yeah, I can find it, but it makes no sense for the numbers to be this low outside of it being a musical, which
Well,
tends to skew older and whiter.
Yeah.
And like Joseph said, like it's during COVID, so that would affect it. But they didn't expect it to be this much of a flop, at least the first week.
Fast and the Furious, if it came out last week, it'd have done 100 million.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, like,
that's going to be younger.
those are not in the same like league.
Right,
So
they're
Les
different.
Miserables,
That's not the same league.
Les Miserables during their run did 441.8 million.
Well, I
Like,
mean,
that is like a historically
It's awesome.
known musical of like all around the world. In the
Yeah.
Heights is like it's like In the Heights, like I know I haven't seen, that's why I asked if you had seen the play, because I will say like locally at least, or like from amongst liberal-ish people, whatever, like a lot of people, the play at least is a very, very renowned play.
Yeah.
And I haven't had the opportunity to see it, but like it's the kind of play like anyone who I know likes film or plays, they also like if you have the opportunity to see it when it's being, when it's showing somewhere, when the cast somewhere, you should see it. But interestingly enough, I personally, like, my mom my mom when I was very young said something kind of slightly controversial to me when I was younger, but she always told me, that she always said, like it's not the Spanish people don't like, other people or such or that. It's just like she always said, like I'm Jamaican, right? And she always like, they're never going to be like, just the same way that no one can be closer to you than another Jamaican, right? Like when we get into our yardy ways, like you can't get close with them like other Spanish people would get close with them. And like I always felt like it was even the play felt kind of for them in a weird way, like because I felt like they could have expanded it and made it more like for instance, like I went to, and I know a lot of Black schools, right, that didn't have access to that play, but the like high schools and such in Manhattan and in like a bunch of people who went to college like Washington Irving and Washington Heights, they saw that. They saw it.
There's a bunch of white groups that are going to see.
That's
they're
what
like
I'm
renting
saying.
out
Like white high
theaters and going to
schools
see
and
it.
Latino high schools, Lin-Manuel Miranda was making sure they were seeing it.
Right.
But the Black schools, we weren't seeing it. So I don't have any basis for, like, I don't know. All I know is that it's like a Latino-based play that's supposed to be really, really good. That's kind of like basically how it's always been sold to me, like by people who I know have seen it or whatever. And like in terms of just like the colorism aspect, I think that there's a lot of like the colorism is a personal like issue. I have a lot of issues with colorism just generally in culture and society, and I feel like it's so insidious individually how it works within different cultures. So like when it comes to sometimes like especially like Latin culture things, like I almost don't engage in the conversation because like I feel like they have their ways of having those problems that doesn't specifically like revolve around me, right? You know what I mean? Like
I can see.
but
Yeah.
even though it does, like for instance, like in the Friends example, right? Like to me, Washington Heights is like anything that's in New York should be diverse, period. So
Right.
I don't care if it's Washington Heights, I'm still would expect that there's to be Black people in the thing anyway.
Right.
And I know for them, that's not even a starter. I'm sure they're like, they're wanting for some Afro Latinos in the movie.
Right.
They're not wanting for Black people in the movie,
Right.
right? We obviously live there next door to them too.
So are we talking about the diaspora here? Or are we talking about African Americans here? Because I would consider Afro Latino people to be Black people. right?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, so but
Yeah.
I don't know how they feel because
Exactly.
I wish we had an Afro-Latino on to really discuss this.
Right. That's the
Like
thing.
I would look at Celia Cruz and I'd be like, if your name was,
Jenkins.
Celeste, Charles, like you just be a black woman, right? So like I don't know like how that is, but I think if you're going to have something representative of Washington Heights, I mean, we've been to Washington Heights, right? There's got to be some black people in it, right?
It's like and I use the friend example for that reason. Like
Yeah.
I never disliked Friends, but like I'm just a very like logical person. Like it could have been a cartoon for me because I was just like, who are these magical people who live in a city where there's no brown people? Like at least the news guy with the newsstand would be Indian or something. Like, like at least somebody got to be brown. And like when people have these kind of shows where it's like, oh, like this is our world. Like in our world, there are no other people. I'm just like, okay, so if that's what you want to do, then that's for you. And I just consider like that's not for me. And that's why I wouldn't I don't have any plans to watch it. If it like came across my TV, I might watch it.
It's on HBO Max.
Actively go watch it in the Heights.
Yeah.
Nicole, you were gonna say something before we got called it. I think we cut you off.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think that was.
I actually ask you guys because you've been to Washington Heights, but are there many Afro Latinos there?
Yes.
So
Yes.
Is that right? A register of Afro Latinos.
It's the lack of representation amongst Afro Latinos. So like personally, I'm not into musicals. I wasn't like, oh, I want to see In the Heights. It's like what you said, Joseph. Like if I stumbled across it and people are like, it's really good, I would give it a shot. But I just know that amongst the Afro-Latino community and with people who I know in that community, they're not happy because they're like, where are we? That's our lives as well. And we don't see ourselves represented except for like maybe background dancers.
I was told.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good segue.
I was told I needed to reinforce that there are black characters, black main characters.
Okay.
But I mean, it's what it is.
Main characters, they didn't choose people who are darker, and it's one of those things where like I don't really, like you mentioned, like that's not my fight, but at the same time, like I'm gonna support.
But I support the people fighting that fight because I think that it should be more diverse. But exactly.
At the same time, I don't want to make any arguments, yay or nay, because it's not something that I'm really familiar with. I don't want to speak for people, but from what I have heard, this is an issue that they feel like there is erasure. And that sucks. If there's is it like the equivalent of making a movie about Baltimore and everybody's light skin in Baltimore? Like, no.
And so my homeboy was like, it's the equivalent of making a movie about Baltimore, and it's like focused on Roland Park. It's like, oh, there's something.
Right.
I can't quite put my finger on it, but this doesn't quite seem to be representative of how it is.
I know if you've been to Washington Heights, it is so diverse.
It's so diverse.
Yeah.
Like, it's Latino people and a lot of like a large Dominican.
Yes, that's what when I think Washington Heights, I think Dominicans too, and I guess this is
and I feel like that's partially like I feel like especially in terms of that's part like I was like that's a good segue because I watch a lot. I listen to a lot of Joe Budden podcasts, right? And like people always get and make fun of Joe because like he'll make it say something about a black woman. And he's like, but that's not your type. Like basically all of his girlfriends are like Washington Heights girls. Like if you've been to Washington Heights, for me, like there is a way where that has just kind of become the standard visual for like hip hop culture. Is basically like a girl from Washington Heights. Like, it's like she could be some range of the spectrum of light brown and like
not past the color of a paper bag.
Exactly, right? Like it's very, it's like a curvy Zoe Saldana. It's Zoe Saldana.
We don't want the smoke
with curves, right? It's Zoe Saldana with curves, and like I feel like they don't. I feel like what happens in the acting world, they don't really have a lot. Like they haven't been making in the Latin community, especially. I feel like they haven't been making good investments in like casting people who are like Afro.
And that's where the anti-blackness comes in, because what's her name?
So the bench is shallow. They don't have a deep bench to pull from for actors.
Whose responsibility is that?
That's their fault.
For not giving the actors an opportunity.
For not finding them?
Because I'm sure there are plenty of people who auditioned.
There were some that auditioned.
Yeah,
I'm sure that they auditioned, but I do like, I don't necessarily like as a design person, like a creative person, like this happens in my industry too, right? Where like, because I'm a person who does respect craft, especially, and I do believe like I've worked for very high-end companies. I don't believe in diversifying the design team of those companies just for them to be diverse. I like the days when everyone who worked on a design team had like a certain level of like integrity, like design integrity, like, and even actors, I believe I love acting and film in that same way. So like I believe it's kind of like, that's why you kind of need to have, every community needs to be like responsible for developing its own people, because like you're not going to have the actors there to make the great movie when it comes around if you're not developing. It's not going to come. It's generally not going to happen on their first film.
The issue with that is gatekeeping, though. Who decides who decides who's top notch and who isn't? Who decides?
Well, I just mean like there should be, even like for instance like Jennifer Hudson, right? Like Black people, even though we have our problems with colorism, I feel like we have done a very good job at like at least attempting better diversification of bodies, etc., in the Latino community. Latino people, like, to their benefit or whatever, they have a lot of gorgeous. It's like you watch, like it's like the pageant world, right? If you go into modeling or pageant, like the world of aesthetics, they have deep, like a very Barbie bench of girls.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like,
when you break down things. And so, like, it's really hard. You have to make a concerted effort to get the other people out there because they get swamped.
But
we have better diversity.
Yeah.
Gatekeepers are, I think, an issue. And I think maybe a bigger issue is like, so when we speak about representation, what someone who wants to be an actor, actress sees on film, a person who's talented and able to do an amazing job may not even want to try, because it's like, well, they're not going to pick me. Look at who's on TV.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many people right now who we don't even know about, who are extremely talented. Because
think of America Ferrera. I think she's so talented. That girl's so talented, but like her lane was so obviously narrowed. Like once she had like her big shows and such, you could tell it's like it happens to a lot. Like I find the same issue with like Black culture and like brown skin artists, right? Like I have a whole section of my Spotify that I just give stream to like brown skin girls who I love, that are amazing. But I know they're never going to like get to that next threshold. Not because, and people will have a conversation, they'll be like, oh, are they not trying hard enough? Are their new songs not big enough? And it's like, no, they're just not going to be put on.
Yeah,
it's not their fault.
Give them a shot based off of what they look like. And I mean, perfect example, I have a friend who was doing a project, this was some years ago, that was, going to be featured on TV. And she chose a friend to be in this pilot with her, and the friend had dark skin, and whoever was producing the pilot said, no, we don't want her. Can pick another friend. And the friend they picked was someone who I guess would be more palatable to what they think would be more palatable to an audience. Like a lot of times, just what you look like, no matter how talented you are, keeps you out of the
Keeps
door.
you there.
So it's like,
Well,
unless you're going to take the Issa Rae approach and just
Issa Rae, yes.
hire by yourself. But Issa Rae, she's not everybody's Issa Rae. Not everybody's got that.
Exactly. Not everyone's going to be that exceptional. Exactly.
And remember,
you have to be able to write, produce, do everything just to make your own job.
You got to be able to do it all. Whereas someone who, you know, it doesn't look like Issa Rae, who might be lighter, who might, you know,
Lauren London.
Exactly. Like sometimes, I mean,
That was their beef, right?
just based off of what you look like, you have no choice but to create your own opportunity.
Lane.
Exactly. And then
and that's really challenging. And that's why it's like, okay, with Lin-Manuel Miranda, it's like you know how this works.
Yeah.
But now it's kind of like, are you blind to it because this is not your issue?
Rita Moreno too. You especially know how this works. Like, and she walked it back.
But you know,
some people
I do think to give them.
Right.
Yeah.
But like, I see myself in this role. Yay. Shh, I don't want to hear you talk about it because I see me. But it's like, there are other people like, hello, but what about?
Yeah.
Like because with auditions and acting, like I see it firsthand with, you know, my brother who's also a host on the podcast, who's just not here today. There's gatekeeping with auditions.
Yeah.
There are roles where I'm looking on TV and I'm like, how come Sean didn't get the audition for that? Because I know he could do better than that person, or I know he's just as good. But sometimes you got to fight just to be seen. And if you can't even get in the door, then, you know, and it's kind of, I think maybe people are disappointed because, you know, the people involved in the project, they can't, I mean, maybe they just weren't aware of what they were doing. But I'm surprised that no one stepped up and was like, look, does this really look like
Are you surprised though? Are you really surprised?
I'm not surprised. It's disappointing. Not surprising so much. It's just like, wow, really?
Yeah.
Like you too? Dang, come on.
Not to put like pressure on them, but like I do it's very interesting because like Lin-Manuel and the other actress who said what she said on Stephen Colbert, blanking on her name right now.
Rita Moreno.
They like, I do think that there is like a degree to which like how these struggles like generationally kind of become complicated, because I can very much imagine a world where for Miss Moreno and for Manuel, where they feel like they are breaking the boundaries with this project for them.
Sure.
Whereas like we've now actually leapfrogged that. Whereas like the conversation now requires something like that to be more diverse, which is I feel like at a time, maybe 15 years ago, like that would have dropped and been totally fine. Yeah. Right? Like it would have dropped and been totally fine and no one would have really like wondered about like why wasn't it more diverse or whatever. But like I could imagine like say if there was a Selena movie, right? And people would have been like today and people would be like, why isn't there more Afro-Latina representation in the Selena movie? And I too would be out here dying.
So Selena,
that's different though. Selena was different though because
Selena's Mexican.
Not that it would be right. I just mean that we do. I feel there's a lot of like
biographical.
Everything is more critical now.
No Afro-Latino people in her life.
Yeah,
that would make sense because it's based on true events. So you're trying to hire someone for, or you know, people are auditioning for a role. One of the important things is that they look similar to the character.
Yeah.
So I think that might be a little bit different.
And while they're Black Mexicans, like Selena was Mexican, so I'm not sure if there were too many Afro-Latinos like in her Mexican cohort, so to speak. But
and that's a bad example. Like I know what you're talking about. You know, I just meant to say more so that like I just think our discourse is way more like critical and like enlightened now. Yeah. So I just like I often think about like as just a lover of film, like there's a lot of like I know a lot of like podcasts I watch, people will talk about things. They'll be like, oh, that's a white movie. Oh, I don't watch white stuff, you know, like whatever. And I'm not that kind of person. Like I have loads of film that are very like I used to be that person at the Angelica, like seeing the indie film like every.
You like what you like.
Movie is a good movie.
I was always
good movie is a good movie.
When I was a teenager, my mom would walk in my room like, "What is this?" I'm like, I like it.
But like there's there's loads of stuff where now I feel like there was a time where like, especially I feel like my age group or like maybe close to our age group, like when I was in college, I felt like especially those Bush years, like film was so heavy in the late Bush years. Film was so heavy and so good and so like complex. It was all about like how deep was the film, Whereas I feel like things later kind of became so much more aesthetic and like surface based. It's like, who's in this film? What does it look like? What are the costumes? Like the film is kind of just like another side, like an afterthought. It's more like, what is this film representing?
I think a lot of that is the advent of social media and what you need to have to happen. Because you talk about the last Bush years in 2007. I remember I was in New York. I saw No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood on the same day. The old 2-1.
I have conspiracies about that, child. I got conspiracies about that, child.
The old 2-for-1. It's like a pay for one movie. It's like, this is starting in 15 minutes.
The old social priming.
Yeah, so they had just cleaned it out and it was like, people are starting to spill in. It was like,
right?
Yeah. Excuse me. And I wanted to see it, but to your point, Joseph, like, I the substance and maybe the depth of movies, like that could be it. There's something to that, but I think with this, it's the youngins, and I think it's the youngins who are like, we aren't going to take this because
social media wasn't what it is.
No. Yeah,
now,
they have their own lanes and make things happen. I'm like,
is that they didn't
but like
have an
even in relation to this film, like I don't know how good or bad it even is. Like I just feel like it's all gonna be about like the appearance of the film. Like I don't know if it could be good enough to outweigh these problems. Like I feel like now, like when you have a film and this is like, and the diversity is not really done well or things like that, like it can really just sink the project. Because even myself, like I have no interest in going seeing it now. Whereas before, if it was like sold to me.
If no one brought it up, would it matter? Would it have mattered if no one brought it up?
If no one brought it up, I might have gone to see it.
For me, it wouldn't have, because I'm just not a musical person. Like I still haven't seen Hamilton. Like a lot of musicals that
same.
And because I'm just not into musicals, and I know when I see them, I do enjoy them, but musicals aren't a priority to me, so I can't even see, like, it's not like, oh, well, you lost a potential viewer. Not in me, but I can see how other
that point is, when we were kids, we watched cartoons, right? We watched the most racist shit in the world on cartoons.
Exactly.
Because we didn't know.
Yeah, we didn't know.
It didn't matter.
That's a really good point, Walter. Yeah, it did not matter. Like now, and I guess it's a good thing coming from us as Black people on about like these things matter now. And a lot of the times, and sometimes it can make people feel uncomfortable. A lot of times it's like young liberal white people who are like, where's the representation in this film? And I'm like, you're all over this. But of course, like they have a lot of power in the sense, not them themselves, but family.
The reason why that bothers me sometimes, I feel like, is because like I want, like, in a weird way, like it's not necessarily important to me that like the films necessarily become more diverse. It's more important to me that like there are more opportunities for everyone, right? Because like I don't need there to be just like more Black people in a white film, or like like I want to see like there's a really great movie and it to have a majority Black cast, and like that just to be the thing. Like it's not a Black movie.
Yeah, it's
because it's a Black majority Black cast. It's just a good movie.
Yeah.
And I do feel like in the 90s, like, because I do feel like we go in and out of doing this well, like PC culture. Like there are like good things about being PC about things. It's like, okay, let's make sure everyone is accounted for. but then it's kind of like physical memory with sports, right? It's like you want to get to a point where you can do something so well that you just
it's repetitive, yeah, it's muscle memory.
You're not thinking about it every time you do it, right? I feel like that's the same way that I feel like that's where we're trying to get to. We're not there yet, but that's where we need to get to. We need to where you're just like making a good film and like all of the right instincts are already there. So you're not like, because then the ticking the boxes, it becomes really obvious when it happens.
Yeah.
But I think to Walter's point though, I mean, this movie is getting rave reviews, like from everybody.
Yeah,
Yet no one is really seeing it. The story around it is
who are not Afro-Latino, who, you know, were excited about it and really enjoyed it. And I was happy that they had that experience. So on the flip side, it's like, it sucks that there are people who, you know, would probably see the movie and enjoy it, but still feel some kind of way like, wow, we were left out of this.
Yeah.
It's an important conversation to have, and we'll obviously talk more about Blackness and colorism because it never goes away.
Not this country.
No,
colorism is so tiring and exhausting.
It's one of those great long-lasting gifts that colonialism left us. Like
the darker you are, the more it impacts your life.
Indeed.
Right? You know, it's so interesting too because like you know, when you go like in and out of community, it's like it's interesting to see like how like there are some communities who like they have like kind of opposite colorism, like where they like exalt really dark-skinned people.
Where is that?
Over light people, and they're like make a
where is that magic?
Like I do know communities of this. I do know communities like this where you'll like there are certain people who think that there's some kind of progressivism within like treating light-skinned people like not nice because they think
and that's unacceptable
already. You know what I mean? And like I don't feel like that's like not the way to win, but there are all these like, and it's like no, that's not it either. You know what I mean? Right. But like I feel like there's just like a to me like as a brown person, I'm always trying to figure out like how much of that like I can like actually ascribe to something being wrong, you know? Because there are a lot of people like I was on for Harriet's thing one time and she was talking about like different like singers or whatever, and I had mentioned like Seven Streeter and Justine Skye and like a bunch of these people or whatever, and like everyone like there was like a ready reaction for everyone like, oh, but what's her last project really serious, or like, you know, oh, is she really trying that hard, or oh, but come on, like her presentation isn't very good or whatever. And it's like,
people, I don't
know. These light-skinned girls' presentation is not that much better.
These people put their heart into their projects. Whenever you roast a project just because, you know, you're trying to be flippant about it. Yeah, I don't like when people
do why do you stay in your face so hard? Is it because of their publicity? Is it because of their machine behind them? Like, you have to think about all the elements that come together.
Yeah.
Pop star that make them the most popular.
Exactly, because if the label isn't putting any money into their project, what are they supposed to do?
Exactly.
I mean, you know, you can only do so much unless you have the means to do like crowdfunding and get people behind your project. But a lot of times, like when it comes to entertainment, there's so much gatekeeping. So many people
not about just
so many people want to feel important, and you know. It's
I know I said it's weird, like because and you were like, you know, where does that happen? Weirdly in fashion, like I have found like my own, you know, over most of my career. Of course, we have like lots of racism in fashion, but there is like
we're gonna talk about that.
There is really weird, like in the way that fashion, like literally anyone in fashion would like lick the bottom of Naomi Campbell's foot. Like you could go to the most bouted person in all of fashion and they would lick her toes. And Tyra wouldn't make it through the door. And I'm just saying she wouldn't get past the bouncer.
Yeah.
And there are some places there are some like circles where I do feel like people see what happens in colorism and people don't like it, but people don't know what to do about it. So they just try to do these like reverse empowerment things.
Yeah.
Like, we don't like what's going on here. So I'm just gonna empower the dark-skinned girl. Like most fashion designers, right? Like they almost exclusively hire African / like very exotic girls and or like brown skin girls. It's only really what people don't even know. It's only really like lower end people, like designers / more mainstream in the thing, who like the light skinned girls. Like in actual high fashion, no one is checking for them.
Thought about it like that, but
no one. But in the Black community, we like, oh my god, they get all this attention. And I just feel, and I'll be sitting there like, that's cute, but they're not in any of the circles that anybody cares about.
Yeah, because I have noticed in the high end fashion, and I mean, I could be wrong. You could correct me, but it seems like the people who are chosen, it is really based on how interesting their faces are.
Interest, exactly. Yeah. It's like about being good. How interesting are you?
Yeah.
How much you can't just be like, and I do feel like even in like, you know, with the heights thing and stuff, it's like there's so many kinds of beauty that actual people who care about beauty find interesting.
Right.
But everyone is like, the base people are like down here having this base conversation, like fighting for the basic girls that and guys that no one even necessarily is checking for. Like no one who really cares about aesthetics is checking for. You know, like Ducky Thought is like who Chanel cares about. You know,
that's just an interesting name. I've never heard that before.
Oh, she's this really real. She's like Naomi Campbell's like daughter. She's like not real daughter, but she's this African girl who's like, you've definitely seen her. She's like blue black almost.
Oh,
she's huge on Instagram.
I feel like you've seen her.
I've definitely seen her.
Okay,
I'm thinking of the She.
Sorry.
I'm going to, I mean, I'm sure hopefully our audience loved this segment, but we kind of sort of veered off from In the Heights, but it continued on the colorism, and we'll continue this.
Yeah.
He is.
1 second.